Good morning, world. This is David Tashroudian with One Structural and our division Retrofit One. We're here today on this beautiful rainy morning. I'm looking out my window here and I can see the rain coming down. It's great. I don't have to turn my sprinklers on, so we get a little bit of a respite from the droughts and get a lot of water relief. So I love it when it rains. But anyhow, we're here today to talk about seismic retrofitting in the city of Burbank. I see we've got a couple of viewers here, actually 10. That's great. That's more than I expected. So without further ado, I think I'd like to start. So let's get the presentation that we have presented up here. So we can present, let's add to the stage. There we are. Again, my name is David Tashroudian. I'm the principal of One Structural, Inc. We have a couple of divisions. We do a couple of different things. We do soft story retrofitting for soft story mandates throughout Southern California and Northern California. So cities like Los Angeles, Burbank, Pasadena, West Hollywood, where else? Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Torrance now, San Jose, San Francisco, all require soft story retrofitting. We do that under our division Retrofit One. We also build multifamily ADUs, accessory dwelling units, in those buildings that require soft story retrofitting. I'm not so sure if the presentation today is going to touch on that, but I can mention it, sort of as we go through here. And we also do balcony inspections and repairs under SB 326 and SB 721. But like I said, today we're going to be focusing primarily on earthquake retrofitting in the city of Burbank. So let's move forward. So the city of Burbank has followed suit with other cities in the state of California and the county of Los Angeles. I think I mentioned them earlier. Sorry, someone's calling me. It's my sister. Those cities have adopted an ordinance to have buildings with soft or weak lines on the face of them to be retrofit. A soft or open or weak line is essentially a portion of a building, for lack of a better term, that has tuck under parking. You can see it on the top right here. Those buildings are particularly susceptible to collapsing. There was a lot of buildings that collapsed during the Northridge earthquake in 1994, as well as the Loma Prieta earthquake up in San Francisco in 1989. These buildings tend to collapse on themselves. So not only are the people in the parking spots, if they are there, the cars or the people in the parking spots, susceptible to being injured, so are the people living upstairs and on any of the floors right above the soft story condition. Once those buildings do collapse, those people can die. And as a matter of fact, there was a significant amount of loss of life during the Northridge earthquake. And so the state has taken, not the state, but the city has taken steps to ensure that people do not perish in the event of an earthquake. And I know we live in Southern California and we haven't had a significant seismic event in quite some time, but my understanding from the geologists is, excuse me, sorry, that it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time before there's a seismic event that has the sort of capacity to topple these buildings, to force these soft story buildings to collapse, and the cities are trying to get ahead of it. And the state, as a matter of fact, has identified soft story buildings as a threat to the safety of the public. I think it's somewhere in the Health and Safety Code. Maybe it's the government code, but I believe it's the Health and Safety Code, where the legislature has identified these buildings as being a threat to the safety of the public and the residents. So it's very important that the state and the cities take steps to ensure that people are safe in their homes, because if it's left up to landlords aren't going to do it. That's why there are these ordinances coming down the pike in different parts of the state. Southern California has been, I would say, probably the leader in this. I mean, Northern California, sure, was where these ordinances first came about. San Francisco, as a matter of fact, was the pioneer, and then other cities in the Bay Area, such as Oakland and some of the smaller ones, like Fremont came on board, but it's been like a tidal wave down here in Southern California. Los Angeles was the first city to adopt an ordinance. Then shortly thereafter came Santa Monica. Then we had Pasadena, Beverly Hills, and now the city of Torrance and the city of Burbank are going to require it. So we're here just to talk about the city of Burbank, and that is going into effect on January 10, 2025, which was almost 2 months ago. So what can you expect? So the city council of Burbank has passed their ordinance. The ordinance is at Title 9, Chapter 1, Article 16, Division 4 of the Burbank Municipal Code. So if you want to look it up, you can find a copy of the municipal code and do that, or you can navigate over to the city of Burbank's website and you can find it there. It's relatively easy to find. It's on the soft story seismic. It's on the seismic soft story retrofit page at the city of Burbank. It's relatively easy to find and to understand. So if you want to get an idea of exactly what's required under the municipal code, that's where you can find it. So the municipal code identifies these vulnerable buildings as being wood-framed buildings that have 2 or more stories that are constructed pursuant to building codes that were enacted prior to 1978, January 1, 1978. And again, these are buildings that possess a weaker first floor, and it's characterized by having large openings along the building perimeter, such as garage openings and tuck-under parking. You might also find soft-story buildings in places that you wouldn't imagine, and that's in commercial buildings. So commercial buildings that have large glass storefronts with living spaces above, those are oftentimes characterized as soft-story buildings that need to be repaired. That's kind of its own animal, because when you're performing the soft-story retrofit in a commercial building, you're disrupting the commercial tenants. We had one project that we did in the south part of Los Angeles where we were going through a barber shop, we were going through an antique shop, and I forgot what the third business was, but we were there, performing work in the ceiling, installing steel inside of the shop, and performing foundation work inside the shop. So just keep that in mind, that if you do own a commercial building and you get one of these notices to mandatory soft story ordinance, that it's not always going to be just residential buildings. Mixed use buildings are affected as well. So the scope of the statute is that it's going to apply to all wood-framed buildings. Again, wood-framed buildings that were built pursuant to building codes that were in place prior to January of 1978. That's the same criteria that the city of Los Angeles is using or has used, and I think also the cities of Santa Monica, Pasadena, West Hollywood, and Beverly Hills. All of those jurisdictions have this 1978 year as the cutoff line, and that's because buildings designed prior to 1978 didn't take seismic forces into account as much as they did afterwards. So the building code was revised in 1978 to ensure that the seismic forces acting on a building were taken into account during the design process. And so yeah, that's why we have 1978 as the cutoff. Now, if you read the statute closely, it says that we're looking at buildings that were designed under building codes that were in effect prior to 1978. So even if the building was completed in 1979 or 1980, you want to look at the plans and to see if the plans were approved prior to 1978. If they were, it's likely that the building, even though it was constructed or the construction was completed after 1978, will still fall under the soft story retrofit ordinance in the city of Burbank. One other thing to note here is that single families and duplex structures that qualify as occupancy group R3, so that if you've got a property that's a single family home on an R3 lot or a duplex on an R3 lot, that building is going to be exempt, even if it does have a soft story characteristic. Now, the cities of Los Angeles and the other cities I discussed earlier, the city of Los Angeles rather, and the other cities that I mentioned earlier, have a cutoff for the number of units that are required before you have to do a retrofit. And that cutoff is usually 3 or more units. Sometimes it's 4 or more units, depending on the jurisdiction. But the way the city determines whether or not a particular parcel or a building on a parcel requires a retrofit is not dependent on the number of units on that parcel, but rather the number of units in the individual buildings on the parcel. So, for example, I was out in Burbank this weekend meeting with a client, and the client has an R3 lot, but it's got 4 units, right? And so there's one duplex house in the front, and then in the back there's another duplex house. So our question to the city of Burbank is whether or not that building is going to have to be retrofit. And only one of the buildings has a soft story condition, and that's the back building with the 2 units. So we're trying to determine with the city of Burbank, and they haven't been very helpful. As a matter of fact, all they've told us is basically go take a look at the statute, interpret the statute for yourself to see if you have to retrofit. But yeah, that's something to look out for as well. So if you do get a notice in the mail and you have 4 units on a property, it might not necessarily be the case that you have to retrofit if that property is zoned R3 and you have multiple buildings with 2 or less units on the in each of those buildings. So keep that in mind. Okay, so Burbank has issued a roadmap to comply. So all of these cities give you time to comply with the retrofit ordinance, and the time is a kind of a funky thing, right? Because you know that there's a dangerous condition on your property, but you've got 5 years to fix it. So the question is, like, if there is an earthquake, someone gets hurt, are you going to be held negligent or liable for those injuries because you knew that your building contained or had a dangerous condition on it, your property had a dangerous condition on it, but you did nothing to mitigate that danger? So even though you have 5 years, I would imagine, also considering that the state of California has identified these buildings as a hazard to the public, it might make sense to get these retrofits in place prior to the expiration of the 5-year period. And the reason also that that's important is because as time goes by, things just get more expensive. I mean, a retrofit that may have cost $50,000 in 2019 probably costs $57,000, $58,000 now. That's a 4% increase in the price, much lower than the rate of inflation, but still, things are going to slowly creep up and get more and more expensive. So the roadmap to comply involves a couple of different steps. First, you're going to get an order to comply from the city, and that order is going to say, landowner Jane Doe, you have a building in the city of Burbank that we've identified as possibly needing retrofit. Submit this screening report, and the screening report is the second step. So you've got to fill out this, and I think we have a copy of this screening report in the next slides coming up. The screening report is going to be for you to self-identify whether or not your building is going to require soft story retrofitting. So you get your order to comply. You've got a certain number of months to prepare this and submit the screening report. Once the screening report has been received by the city of Burbank, they'll reach back out to you and let you know if, based on what's identified in the screening report, you've got to perform the retrofit or not. Let's say you've submitted your screening report and the city of Burbank has identified, yes, your building does fall within the requirements of the ordinance. You've got to submit a set of retrofit plans. You've got a specific timeline to do that, and we'll go through the timeline in subsequent slides. But you've got to have these plans prepared and submitted by a certain date. And there are incentives if you get your plans in early, or if you complete your retrofit early. The city of Burbank will provide you some financial relief, like they'll waive your permit and plan check fees. I think it's the permit and plan check fees. It's one of those fees that they'll waive, if not both, if you get the retrofit done in on an expedited basis. So if you get the retrofit done in a year, they'll waive some fees, and if you don't get your retrofit done within that time period, you've got to comply regardless and pay their fees as you get billed. So after the retrofit plans have been approved, you've got another a little bit of time to perform the retrofit itself, and we'll get through those timelines here. So here is the timeline. So the notice date, and the time is all going to be based on the date of your notice to comply. So you're going to get your notice to comply. Let's say, for example, you got your notice to comply on January 10th, 2025, when they first go out. You've got 1 year to submit your screening form. You've got 2 years from that notice to comply date to submit engineering plans. You've got 3 years from that notice to comply date to get your plans approved. You've got 4 years from the notice to comply date to pull a construction permit. Then you have 5 years total to ensure that construction is completed. So this actually came from the ordinance. So if you want to take a look for yourself and mark these dates in your calendars, again, pull the statute or pull the ordinance, or even call us up here at the office and we can assist. So the screening form will accompany the notice to comply. So you'll get the screening form and you'll have to fill it out. And this is a copy of the screening form. It's going to ask you about the condition of your property. And one thing that I'm unclear of, and we should clear this up with the city of Burbank, and we will, is whether or not a design professional is required to sign off on your screening form. If a design professional is required to sign off on your screening form to ensure that the accuracy of what's stated in there, it's going to cost a couple of bucks. But if a design professional is not required and you can do it yourself, there's going to be a cost savings there, and we'll reach out to the city of Burbank to determine if the screening form is going to have to be signed by a design professional like an architect or an engineer, or whether or not the owner can self-certify. So we should have that answer to you within the next week or so. So if you have any questions about that particular part, feel free to call us in the office. We'll be happy to share that information with you. There's also a pass-through cost savings, just like the City of Los Angeles. The City of Los Angeles allows the owner to pass through portions of the cost, up to 50% of the cost amortized over 10 years to the tenants. The City of Burbank will do the same thing, but they're a little bit more generous in the cost recovery that they're allowing. The City of Los Angeles caps your cost recovery, meaning the surcharge that you can apply to the tenants, to $38, whereas the City of Burbank gives you up to $51 per month for a total of 120 months, or until 50% of the retrofit cost is recouped. So we're in it together with our tenants. The state didn't want to overload the landlords, so they gave the landlords a little bit of a financial respite in allowing the landlords to recover some of the costs from the tenants, because it's both for the tenants' safety and it's also for the landlords to preserve their asset, just in case there is a large seismic event. There isn't a reduction in the housing supply, which would have adverse effects on the economy for various reasons. Let's talk about let's talk about seismic retrofitting with us. So we've completed, 700 or 800, maybe 1,000 seismic retrofits since 2016. We've got a lot of experience doing this. We've got a lot of experience designing these things to ensure that the design not only complies with the statute, but also is as economical as possible. I mean, we can over-design it if that's your preference, but we can also design the retrofit to a point where it's really economically feasible and that there wouldn't be any further reduction in the design. So yeah, we pride ourselves on our pragmatic approach to engineering and our value engineering. We're here to satisfy all of the requirements. We can perform the engineering design. We apply for and obtain all the permits, and we perform the construction. Here's a couple of shots. I'm going to end with this. Here are a couple of shots of buildings that needed retrofit and how they were retrofit. So this building needed a retrofit in this line going across where the parking spots are. We were able to install the column right to the very left of the building to avoid any interference with the width of the parking. So that was a really interesting design where we were able to ensure that the functionality of the building was retained while also retrofitting it to make it safe. This is another example where, on the left at least, where we installed a column offset from the garage, between the garage and the stairway walkway, in order to ensure that no space from the garage door opening was taken away. On the right here, you see a column set right next to an existing wall pier. You can see the concrete footing in the ground, and you can see portions of the stucco that doesn't quite match the existing building. That's because we had to open that area up and install our drag elements. On the left here, you see a column, and what's interesting about this column is this column was installed to seismically retrofit the building in two directions, in the long direction of the driveway as well as the short direction of the building as well. And there are two concrete foundation elements that sort of intersect, and you can't really see it from the picture, but if you look closely, you can. And this was a way to use less steel elements that were not protruding into the parking as much while still complying with the city's retrofit ordinance. To design one of these, or to install a solution like this, we had to remove the existing column. That required us to shore the building, meaning to temporarily support the gravity load of the building as we perform the retrofit. On the right-hand side, you see another steel column installed next to an existing one. The existing one is the column with the yellow casing on the bottom third or bottom half. The new column is right adjacent to it, and the concrete foundation is actually attached to the existing pad footing of that column. So a lot of times when you've got existing columns, the new solution will be installed right next to the existing ones. So that's all I have for today. I appreciate the interwebs showing up to our presentation. We'll try to do this a little bit more regularly. But if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us at the office. We'd love to have you here at our office. You can sit with me here at the conference table. We can have lunch. We can discuss your project, the specifics. You can also reach out to us directly by telephone. Our phone number is 844-4-RETROFIT-1 or 844-4-RETRO-1. You can visit us at our website, retrofit1.com. And if you have any questions about accessory dwelling units in multifamily buildings or balcony inspection and repair, we can also help you with that. So with that, I'll leave you. And again, thank you for joining me, and I hope to talk to you soon.